What would you do if the man who destroyed your family's life one day needed you to save his? That question echoed through the quiet streets of Havenbrook, a small Mississippi town where the line between wealth and struggle was drawn clear as day. On one side stood marble fences and silver gates. On the other, cracked porches, peeling paint, and dreams buried under overdue rent notices. It was a humid July afternoon when Mr. Clayton Hargrove, a billionaire real estate developer, pulled up in his black Bentley to the worn-down neighborhood of Ridgeview Court. To him, this wasn't a neighborhood. It was land waiting to be cleaned up. To everyone else, it was home. He stepped out, adjusting his white linen jacket, the heat bouncing off the pavement. His assistant, Derek, followed behind with a clipboard and a cold stare. "Sir," Derek muttered. "They've been behind 6 months. The sheriff's waiting for your go-ahead." Clayton didn't hesitate. "Do it." Inside one of those weather-beaten houses lived Marceline Brooks, a single mother of 2, her teenage son Marcus, and her little girl Raina, just 8 years old. She worked double shifts at the diner downtown, often coming home after midnight, her uniform smelling like fries and exhaustion. When the knock came, Marcus answered, sweat rolling down his forehead. 2 deputies stood there, and behind them, Clayton Hargrove, the man whose face smiled from every billboard in town under the slogan, "Rebuilding Tomorrow." Marceline stepped forward, clutching a worn family photo. "Please," she pleaded, "we just need 1 more month. I can pay." Clayton cut her off coldly. "This isn't personal, ma'am, it's business." Little Raina tugged on her mom's arm, whispering, "Mama, who's that man?" Marceline's voice cracked. "That's the man who owns everything, baby." By sunset, their belongings sat on the curb, clothes, an old TV, and the pink bicycle Raina had gotten for her birthday. The sky burned orange, the air heavy with shame. Marcus clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "One day," he whispered, "he's gonna regret this." Raina didn't understand what eviction meant, only that home was gone. She picked up her Bible and whispered to herself, "God sees." That night, they slept in their old pickup behind the diner. Marceline cried silently in the driver's seat, while her kids huddled in the back under one blanket. Down the road, the Bentley rolled past, tinted windows, jazz playing softly. Clayton didn't look their way. But here's the thing about life in Havenbrook. It doesn't forget. Especially not a child whose world was torn apart. Years later, people would say that night changed everything, not just for the Brooks family, but for Clayton himself. Because sometimes the people you step on while climbing your ladder are the same ones waiting at the top when you fall. From Ridgeview Court, lightning flickered across the horizon. Somewhere inside that storm, destiny was already writing its revenge. 10 years passed. Havenbrook changed. New shopping centers, new condos, and new rules. But some stories never left the soil. Raina Brooks was no longer that little girl sitting on the curb. She'd grown into a tall, striking young woman with fierce eyes and a quiet strength that made people listen when she spoke. She carried the same Bible her mother had handed her the night of the eviction, only now inside its pages she kept her college acceptance letters. After years of hustling, working odd jobs and scholarships that barely covered rent, Raina had made it to Howard University, studying urban development, the same field Clayton Hargrove dominated. But while he built luxury, she dreamed of rebuilding dignity. Her mother still worked nights, her brother Marcus had joined the Navy, and every dollar Raina earned went back home. "We ain't victims, Mama," she'd say. "We're survivors." Meanwhile, Clayton's empire was growing, new towers, new partnerships, and a new PR campaign painting him as a man of the people. But behind the boardroom glass, cracks were forming. Lawsuits, mismanagement, and whispers of corruption followed him like smoke. One day, while interning at a community housing nonprofit, Raina attended a development meeting, and there, across the table, sat Clayton Hargrove. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? To him, she was just another intern. But for Raina, That moment was everything. The man who took her home was now sitting in front of her, shaking hands, smiling, pretending to care about affordable housing. Her heartbeat thundered, memories flashing. The eviction notice, the deputies, the sound of her mother crying. She wanted to stand up and scream his name. Instead, she clenched her notebook tighter, smiled, and said, "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hargrove." He nodded. "Young minds like yours are the future of this country." She thought, "You're about to find out how true that is." After the meeting, her mentor, Dr. Lawson, pulled her aside. "You okay, Raina? You looked like you'd seen a ghost." Raina forced a smile. "Just remembering something I thought I'd buried." That night, she opened her laptop and began researching Hargrove Industries. Page after page, she uncovered fraudulent land deals, shell companies, and names of families forced out of their homes, just like hers. But it wasn't revenge she wanted. Not yet. It was justice. Raina decided she would expose him from the inside. She applied for a position at Hargrove Industries under a fake last name, Raina Cole. Within weeks, she got the job. Her role, community outreach coordinator. Her mission, uncover the truth. On her first day, she stood in front of the glass tower downtown, staring up at the silver letters that spelled Hargrove. A deep breath. A silent prayer. A promise whispered to herself, "I'm walking back into the fire." What she didn't know was that Clayton Hargrove was already falling apart. His marriage was crumbling, investors were pulling out, and the man who once controlled a town was about to meet the one girl who could destroy his entire world. That afternoon, as Raina walked through the sleek hallways of his empire, Clayton happened to pass by. Their eyes met briefly. Something in her face flickered with familiarity. He froze, studying her for a moment, but shook it off and kept walking. Her heart raced. His past had just walked through his door, and neither of them knew what kind of storm was coming next. If this story already has you feeling something, hit that subscribe button and join our top core family. We tell stories that make you feel, think, and believe again. Let's see where Raina's journey takes us next. What happens when the ghosts you created start walking in daylight? The elevator doors of Hargrove Industries closed behind Raina, sealing her inside the world of the man who had once thrown her family into the street. She stood quietly, clutching her employee badge, feeling the pulse of irony echoing through her chest. She had dreamed of this moment for years, not out of hate but hunger. Hunger to prove that the girl they tried to erase had found her way back. Stronger, smarter, unbroken. Her cubicle overlooked the city skyline, a view she'd once seen from the parking lot below, holding a cardboard box of her family's belongings. Life had a strange way of turning circles. Within weeks, Raina became one of the most trusted employees in the Community Affairs Division. She attended board meetings, prepared proposals, and handled public complaints. She listened more than she spoke, collecting every whisper, every paper trail, every careless conversation. Clayton Hargrove, meanwhile, was distracted. His company's stocks were falling, and rumors about misused public funds were circling the media. He'd built his fortune on charm and contracts, but his empire was beginning to rot from within. One Friday morning, Clayton called an all-hands meeting. The staff gathered in the glass conference room, all nervous smiles and fake enthusiasm. He stood at the head of the table, tall, composed, yet clearly aging faster than his years. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we built this company to change lives, and we will continue to do so. Don't believe everything you hear in the press. We're expanding into new territories, stronger than ever." Raina sat in the back, her heart pounding as she studied his face. The same cold confidence, the same dismissive tone. He didn't even recognize her, but she recognized every word he said, because it was the same kind of speech he gave the day her home was taken. As the meeting ended, he walked past her chair. For the first time, his eyes lingered on her. "You're new," he said. "I don't believe we've met." Raina smiled softly. "Raina Cole, sir. I work with the outreach division. Cole? He nodded. Good to have you with us. He didn't know he'd just shaken hands with his unfinished consequence. Later that evening, while the rest of the office cleared out, Raina stayed behind, pretending to finish reports. She slipped into the record room, the company's old archives, filled with dusty boxes and forgotten contracts. Her flashlight danced across file labels, eviction orders, land acquisitions, legal settlements. And there it was. Brooks family, Ridgeview Court redevelopment, 2010. Her hands trembled. Inside was the eviction order signed by Clayton himself, her mother's name scrawled across the bottom. There was also something she never expected, a memo detailing how the redevelopment funds were diverted to an offshore account, one under Clayton's personal name. Her anger hardened into determination. She snapped photos with her phone, saving every page. But as she turned to leave, a voice came from the doorway. Working late? It was Derek, the same assistant who had stood beside Clayton that day years ago. He looked older, heavier, but his eyes were still sharp. Raina froze. Yes, just organizing some old files. He stepped closer, squinting. Funny. No one comes down here anymore, not unless they're digging for something. Her pulse quickened. Just trying to be thorough. Derek smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I like that. Clayton values employees who know when to keep things to themselves. She forced a nod and slipped past him, clutching her phone tight. That night, she sat in her car shaking. She was playing with fire, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she had proof. And she wasn't done yet. As she drove home, thunder rolled across the night sky, the kind of thunder that warned of storms far from over. Clayton Hargrove sat alone in his penthouse study, staring out at the city lights. Once they had looked like trophies. Now they looked like witnesses. He was tired, not just from work, but from pretending. His wife, Charlotte, had moved out months ago, taking their son with her. The papers called him a visionary, but behind the glass, he was a man losing everything money couldn't buy. A knock at the door broke the silence. Derek stepped in, carrying a folder. Sir, there's something you should see. Clayton opened it. Inside was a printout. A newsblog draft titled, The Hidden Evictions Behind Hargrove's Housing Projects. Anonymous source. Leaked documents. Pending release. Who the hell leaked this? He barked. We don't know yet, Derek said carefully. But whoever it is, they've got access to old archives. Clayton rubbed his temples. Shut it down. I don't care what it takes. Derek hesitated. Sir, it might already be too late. Meanwhile, across town, Raina met secretly with her mentor, Dr. Lawson, in a quiet cafe. She slid her phone across the table, showing the photos. This proves everything. He's been stealing from redevelopment funds meant for low-income families. Lawson looked stunned. Raina, do you realize what you're holding? This could destroy one of the most powerful men in the state. That's the point, she said softly. He destroyed us. Now it's his turn. But Dr. Lawson frowned. Be careful. Men like Hargrove don't fall quietly. The next morning, as Raina walked into the office, she noticed security cameras being installed in new corners. The air felt heavier, the smiles tighter. Derek's eyes followed her every move. Clayton called her into his office later that afternoon. Raina, right? He said, pretending warmth. I've been reviewing your work. Impressive initiative. She nodded politely. Thank you, sir. He studied her for a long moment. Where did you say you were from? Chicago. She lied smoothly. He smiled faintly. You remind me of someone I once met. Strong eyes. Raina's heart raced. Maybe I just remind you of the people you've stepped on, he chuckled, not catching the barb. I like your spirit. She left his office shaking, not from fear, but from the rage she'd kept buried for 10 long years. That night she drafted her statement for the reporter, anonymous, encrypted, careful. The evidence was ready. The truth was coming. But as she hit send, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Raina. We know who you really are." Her blood ran cold. She looked out her window. Across the street, a black SUV idled with headlights off. The storm she had started was no longer hers alone, and somewhere downtown, Clayton Hargrove's phone lit up with a text from Derek. "We found her." He stared at the message for a long time, and whispered to himself, so the past wasn't buried after all. If this story hits your chest, don't watch in silence. Drop your comment in the comment box and tell us which country you are watching it from. Let's see how deep this story goes. How far would you go to make a man feel what he made you lose? The morning after the text, Raina couldn't breathe right. Every sound in her apartment felt too loud. Every reflection looked like someone watching her. She deleted the message, powered off her phone, and sat in silence. She had come too far to stop now. By noon, the leak hit the headlines. Real estate mogul accused of diverting community funds. Anonymous source claims inside knowledge. Clayton Hargrove's photo was everywhere, smiling in front of luxury towers, shaking hands with mayors, hiding rot beneath his success. Inside the company, chaos exploded. Lawyers rushed in and out, PR teams camped in the conference rooms, and somewhere between the noise and fear, Clayton felt a single thing he hadn't felt in years: powerlessness. He slammed the newspaper down. "Find out who did this," he barked. Derek adjusted his tie. "We traced the email. It came from inside the building." "Inside?" Clayton repeated, eyes narrowing. "Yes, sir. And there's more. Whoever it was had clearance for high-level archives." That sentence froze time. Only a few people had that kind of access. Derek, Clayton, and Raina. Clayton leaned back, replaying their last conversation in his head. Her tone, her words, the sharpness in her eyes. Something about her didn't sit right. "Bring me her file," he said quietly. By afternoon, HR delivered Raina's personnel folder. Education, address, references. All clean. Too clean. Clayton frowned. "Get me a background check. Deep. I want to know who she really is." That night, Raina sat in her car outside the office, watching reporters gather near the building entrance. Her plan was working, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking on glass barefoot. She thought of her mother, Elaine, of how she used to hum gospel songs while folding laundry, saying, "God don't miss a payment." Raina whispered to herself, "Well, Mama, this is the payment." Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You should have stayed forgotten." Her chest tightened. She looked around. Empty parking lot. Cold air. Then, in her rearview mirror, she saw headlights flash twice, then vanish. She drove off fast, every nerve on fire. Meanwhile, Clayton was at home pacing. His son, Nathan, walked in, a college student, tall, quiet, carrying resentment in his eyes. "Dad," Nathan said, tossing the newspaper on the table. "You did this? You stole from housing funds?" Clayton sighed. "It's not that simple." "No, it's exactly that simple. You took from families who had nothing." "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "I know enough," Nathan said, voice trembling. "You've built everything off other people's pain." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Nathan turned and left, slamming the door. Clayton sank into his chair, gripping his chest. For the first time, guilt felt heavier than success. Back at Raina's apartment, her lights flickered. A knock at the door made her heart jump. She peeked through the peephole. No one there, just an envelope on the floor. She opened it carefully. Inside, an old photo of her mother standing outside their apartment before the eviction, the same building owned by Clayton's company. Someone knew her secret. Raina's phone rang. Unknown number again. She let it go to voicemail. The message played. "We know you're not Raina Cole, you're Naomi Brooks." Her knees gave out. The war she started had just turned personal. Outside, thunder rolled again, not from the sky this time, but from the truth closing in. The next morning, Naomi, no longer hiding behind her alias, stared at her reflection. Her real name, her real story. It was all coming to light. She had planned to control the reveal, to confront Clayton on her own terms, but now someone else had found her out. And that someone was getting closer. At Hargrove Industries, the energy had shifted. The smell of fear filled the air. Workers whispered in hallways, glancing over shoulders. Clayton's private investigator handed him a folder. "You were right. Ray Nicole doesn't exist. Real name, Naomi Elaine Brooks." He froze. That name hit like lightning. He remembered it, not from a file, but from a day long buried. A cold winter morning. A mother begging for mercy. A little girl holding a broken toy and a look that could pierce glass. "My God," he whispered. "It's her." The investigator asked, "What do you want to do?" Clayton stared out the window, watching storm clouds over Atlanta. "Call security, but don't touch her yet." That afternoon, Naomi was called into a special meeting. The HR rep smiled too politely. "Mr. Hargrove would like to see you upstairs." She knew. She could feel it in her bones. They knew who she was. She walked into the top-floor boardroom. Wide windows, cold air, silence heavy enough to crush breath. Clayton sat at the head of the table, calm but unreadable. He gestured to the chair opposite. "Have a seat, Miss Brooks." Naomi's heart thudded. "So, you remember now?" "I do," he said softly. "You were just a child." "You took my home," she replied, voice sharp but steady. "You threw my family into the street like we were trash." He leaned forward. "That decision wasn't personal. It was to me." Their eyes locked, 2 decades of history between them. Clayton sighed. "You sent the leak, didn't you?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I told the truth." He studied her for a long moment. "You could have come to me." "I did. 20 years ago on that sidewalk. You just didn't listen." For a second, something cracked inside him. A piece of humanity he thought he'd buried. But he was still a businessman. Still a man who had spent a lifetime dodging accountability. "You realize what you've done," he said. "This company is under investigation. My name is being dragged through the mud." "Good," Naomi said. "Now you know how it feels." He stood up, fists tight. "You want revenge?" "No," she said coldly. "I want you to remember the faces of everyone you stepped on to build your empire." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think this will fix your past?" "No," she whispered. "But it might fix someone else's future." Security stood outside the door waiting for a signal. But Clayton didn't give it. He just watched her leave, calm, proud, and dangerous in her truth. That night, Naomi received another message, this one from an unknown email. "If you really want justice, meet me. I have more proof against Hargrove." Attached was a single photo, Derek, shaking hands with a city official. Underneath, Project Eastview, 2010 fund diversion. Naomi stared at it, torn between fear and fire. Whoever this was, they had what she needed to finish what she started. She typed one word back. "Where?" Her laptop screen flickered. A new message popped up. Midnight, Old Ridgeview Court, her childhood home, the place it all began. Her pulse raced as she looked out at the dark city skyline. If she went there, she'd find answers. If she didn't, the truth might disappear forever. Either way, she knew one thing. Atlanta was about to remember her name. What do you do when the place that ruined you calls you back? Naomi parked 2 blocks away from Ridgeview Court, or what was left of it. The once bustling apartment complex was now a hollow skeleton of brick and ash. Rusted gates leaned sideways, graffiti marked the walls, and weeds grew through the cracks like veins of memory. She stepped out into the chill of midnight. The air smelled like dust and old sorrow. Her footsteps echoed as she walked through what used to be home. She could still see it in her mind, her mom hanging laundry on the balcony, her little brother chasing his toy car across the cracked pavement. Now only ghosts answered back. She reached the center courtyard where the eviction van had parked years ago. That was the day her childhood ended. That was the day she swore she'd never beg again. A faint light flickered inside one of the burned-out units. She hesitated, then pushed the door open. A man's voice came from the shadows. "You came." Naomi froze. "Who are you?" He stepped forward. Tall, dark coat, scar across his cheek. His voice carried authority. "Name's Harris. Used to work under Hargrove's accounting team." She studied him cautiously. "You sent the email?" He nodded. "You wanted truth. I've got more than you can handle." He handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Contracts, payments, shell accounts. Hargrove's been bleeding the city for years." Naomi turned the drive over in her hand. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I'm done watching men like him get away with it." He took a slow breath. "You think leaking one story hurt him? This will destroy him." She looked at the drive, then back at Harris. "Why now?" "Because the man you're fighting isn't the only one with dirty hands," he said. "Someone else is moving against you. Someone inside his company." Naomi's pulse spiked. "Who?" He shook his head. "I can't say, but trust no one. Not even the people who seem to want your help." A noise broke the silence. Tires screeching outside, headlights sweeping through the broken windows. Harris swore under his breath. "They followed me." He pushed the flash drive into her hand. "Go. Now." Naomi bolted for the back exit as men in dark jackets entered the courtyard. She ducked behind a wall, heart pounding. A gunshot cracked the air. Sharp, final. She looked back. Harris was on the ground. Naomi ran through the alley, clutching the flash drive like her last breath. By the time she reached her car, she could see headlights closing in. She threw the car into gear and sped away, tears streaking her face. Back at her apartment, she locked the door, trembling. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop. Files opened, thousands of them. Bank transfers, forged signatures, city permits, and one folder labeled Eastview Restoration, the same project she was leading. She clicked it open. Inside were emails between Clayton and the city's zoning office, conversations about pushing out low-income tenants quietly, and at the bottom, a name she never expected to see, Elaine Brooks, her mother's name. One email read, "Handled the Brooks eviction personally. No compensation required. Clearance approved by Mr. Hargrove." Naomi's hands shook so badly she could barely breathe. Her mother had begged, pleaded, cried, and he'd signed it away like it was nothing. A sound at her door made her jump. Footsteps, then a knock, 3 slow taps. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, but a voice spoke softly through the door. Male, steady, familiar. "Naomi, it's me. Open up." It was Derek, Hargrove's right-hand man. Naomi didn't move. "What do you want?" Derek's tone was calm. "You're not safe here. Let me in." "Not safe from who?" she asked. He hesitated. "From people who think you know too much." That answer made her blood run cold. She slowly unlocked the door but kept the chain on. Derek's face appeared through the gap. Tired, anxious, almost remorseful. "Can I come in, please?" he asked. "I'm not here to hurt you." Naomi studied his eyes. Steady but guilty. She unlatched the chain. 5 minutes. He stepped in, scanning the apartment. "You got the drive?" She crossed her arms. "You mean the one with every crime your boss ever committed?" Derek nodded. "Then you know why I'm here." Naomi didn't flinch. "To silence me?" "No," he said quickly. "To make you an offer." She laughed bitterly. "You think I'm stupid?" He stepped closer. "You don't get it, Naomi. This isn't just about Clayton anymore. There are bigger hands in this, politicians, investors. You think you're exposing one man. You're threatening an entire system." She didn't care. Good. Let it burn. He sighed. They won't let you walk away, Naomi. They already took out Harris. Her stomach dropped. You knew about that? He nodded slowly. I tried to stop it. But you're in deep now. Naomi clenched her fists. Then why help me? Because I was there that day, he said quietly. She blinked. What day? The eviction, Ridgeview Court. I was a junior clerk. I saw the notice go through. I saw your mom crying. His voice cracked. And I did nothing. Naomi's breath caught. So this is your confession? It's my way of making it right, Derek said. Let me help you take him down. Clean. She wanted to believe him. But the part of her that had slept on church floors, that had watched her mother's dignity crushed, didn't trust easy. She looked him dead in the eye. If you betray me, I swear. I won't, he interrupted softly. I know what it's like to live with guilt. Naomi hesitated, then handed him the drive. You better mean that. He pocketed it carefully. You'll hear from me soon. When he left, Naomi stood in the doorway, unsure if she'd just made the smartest or dumbest decision of her life. Hours later, her phone buzzed again. A private number. She answered. Silence. Then a voice she recognized. Clayton Hargrove. Miss Brooks, he said, smooth but tense. You've caused quite a storm. Did I? She replied, ice in her tone. You don't understand how dangerous this game is. People are watching us both now. Then maybe they'll finally see the truth. He chuckled lowly. Truth doesn't matter in this world. Power does. And you're running out of it. Maybe, she said. But I've still got something you don't. What's that? A soul. He paused, exhaling. You sound just like your mother. Her breath hitched. Don't you dare say her name. I remember her, he said quietly. She looked me in the eye and said I'd regret what I did. Maybe she was right. Naomi's throat tightened. You'll regret it sooner than you think. The line went dead. Naomi stood there, phone in hand, tears burning behind her eyes. The city outside buzzed, alive, indifferent. But somewhere deep in that darkness, she felt it, a storm rising. She didn't know that Derek's car, just 2 blocks away, already had company. A black SUV idled behind him. Inside, 2 men watched, one speaking into a radio. Target acquired. Orders? A voice replied, cold and firm. Follow. Wait for the signal. The web was closing in, and Naomi Brooks was right in the center. What's more dangerous? The enemy you see or the friend who hides behind good intentions? The night after Hargrove's call, Naomi couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against her window like restless thoughts, each drop whispering warnings she tried to ignore. She had trusted Derek, maybe out of desperation, maybe out of a need to believe someone could still do the right thing in a world built on lies. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Meet me. No police, no press. If you want proof, come alone. The address led to an abandoned parking structure downtown, the kind of place where people met when they didn't want to be seen. Naomi grabbed her coat and slipped her pepper spray into her pocket. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone she barely recognized. The scared little girl from Ridgeview was gone. This woman was made of steel and scars. The drive was silent except for the rain. She parked on level 3, headlights cutting through mist and concrete dust. Derek was there, standing by a pillar, hands in his coat pockets. He looked nervous. Where's the proof? She asked. He gave a faint smile. You're early. Good. Don't play games, Derek. I'm done trusting people. He raised his hands. I get it. But you need to see this first. He held up a small black folder. Everything you need to destroy Hargrove, and everyone protecting him. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Then why do you look terrified? Before he could answer, tires screeched below. 3 men in suits climbed out of an SUV, silent, coordinated, trained. Naomi's voice dropped. You set me up. Derek's expression broke. No, I swear they must have traced me. Gunfire echoed, a single warning shot that ricocheted off the metal beams. Naomi ducked, grabbing Derek's arm. They ran through the maze of concrete as bullets sliced through the fog. They reached the stairwell, locked. Naomi turned to him. We're trapped. Derek ripped a fire extinguisher from the wall, smashing the lock open. They stumbled down the stairs as footsteps thundered behind them. They burst into the lower level, breathless. Derek shoved the folder into her hand. Take it and go. They're after me, not you. She shook her head. We both know that's a lie. Another gunshot. Derek staggered, clutching his side. Derek! He fell to one knee, eyes wild with pain. Listen to me. That folder. It's not just about Hargrove. It's about the city, the mayor, the real owners of Eastview. Naomi's heart pounded. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only one who still believes truth matters. He pressed a bloodied hand against her cheek. Make it count. The men rounded the corner. Naomi didn't think. She ran. Up the ramp, across the street, through a side alley until her lungs screamed. When she finally stopped, she was soaked, shaking, and alone. Again. She looked inside the folder. Documents. Photos. One picture caught her eye. A grainy shot of Hargrove shaking hands with a smiling politician under a banner. Eastview Renewal. Building a better future. Below it, a date, the same week her family had been evicted. And in the corner, another familiar face, her own mentor, Dr. Rowan Clark, the one who had helped her secure the grant for her nonprofit. Naomi's breath left her. He had been part of it too. She realized then, everyone she'd trusted was entangled in the same rotten web, and she was the only one left who could tear it apart. Revenge is loud, justice is quiet, until it breaks the walls. Morning came gray and heavy. The city skyline loomed outside Naomi's window, calm and indifferent. She'd spent the night piecing together files, matching signatures, connecting dates. Every trail led back to one man, Clayton Hargrove. But behind him stood a dozen powerful names that made her stomach twist. She knew exposing him publicly would take more than one brave article. It would take a storm. By noon, she walked into the downtown press center. Reporters buzzed around, oblivious to the storm she carried in a simple brown envelope. A receptionist stopped her. Do you have an appointment? Naomi met her eyes. Tell your editor he'll want this story before someone else does. Moments later, she was inside the glass office of the Tribune's senior journalist, Marcus Levy, an old friend of her mother's. Marcus leaned back. Naomi Brooks. Haven't heard that name in a while. What brings you here? She placed the envelope on his desk. The truth. He opened it, scanning the first few pages. His expression hardened. This could take down half the city council. I know, Naomi said. And it's time. He looked up at her. You realize publishing this will paint a target on your back? She smiled faintly. They've been aiming at me my whole life. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's bring the tower down. Hours later, the headline went live. Documents reveal massive real estate fraud tied to city officials and Hargrove Group. By evening, it was everywhere. News anchors debated, activists rallied, and investors started pulling out of Hargrove's empire. Clayton Hargrove watched it unfold from his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. His world, the one he'd built on arrogance and control, was burning. He called Naomi. Congratulations, he said bitterly. You destroyed everything. No, she replied calmly. I revealed what was already rotten. You think the world will treat you like a hero. They'll chew you up. Maybe, she said, voice steady. But at least I'll still have a conscience. There was silence. Then a sound like a broken sigh. You remind me of her, you know, he murmured. Your mother. She had that same fire. She died believing justice was impossible, Naomi said. Today she's proven right. And wrong. He exhaled softly. Goodbye, Naomi. She listened as the line clicked dead, and somewhere across town the sirens began to wail. Hours later, the news confirmed what she'd already guessed. Clayton Hargrove had been arrested while trying to flee the city. Naomi sat on her apartment balcony, the wind cool against her face. She thought of her mother, of Derek, of everyone who had paid a price for truth. She whispered to the night, "We're finally free." The city lights blinked below, and for the first time, they didn't feel like enemies. They felt like witnesses. But as she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You only took down one man. We're still here." Naomi stared at the message, her heart steady now. She deleted it and looked up at the skyline. "Then I'll be here too," she whispered. How do you heal a wound that the world keeps reopening? 3 days after the expose, Naomi's name was everywhere. Talk shows, radio stations, podcasts. Everyone wanted to hear from the young black architect who took down Atlanta's most powerful real estate tycoon. But fame wasn't victory, it was exposure. Outside her apartment, cameras waited. Inside, the phone never stopped ringing. Reporters, lawyers, even strangers claiming to be relatives. And beneath all of it, a noise she couldn't silence. Fear. She'd learned from her mother that the world doesn't change because you shout at it. It changes when you force it to look at what it tried to ignore. Now, the city was looking, but not all eyes were kind. Late one night, Naomi returned from a community event when she noticed something strange. Her apartment door was slightly open. She froze. Her heart raced. She pushed the door gently and the lights flickered on. Her living room had been ransacked. Papers scattered, laptop gone, drawers pulled out. But nothing of real value was taken, except her old sketchbook. The one she'd kept since childhood. The one with drawings of the building she dreamed of one day creating, the East View Center. Her throat tightened. That book wasn't just paper. It was her past, her promise. She dialed the police, but as she waited, a thought chilled her. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Someone wanted her to know she was being watched. The next morning, she met with Marcus at a downtown cafe. "They broke in," she told him. "Didn't take money, just my designs." Marcus frowned. "Then whoever did this isn't finished." He glanced around, lowering his voice. "Naomi, the investigation you started, it's spreading. There are people in City Hall trying to bury it." She looked out the window at the street below, people rushing to work, laughing, living. None of them knew how close their world was to collapse. "What do they want from me?" she asked. "Control," Marcus said. And silence. "You're the face of a movement now. They can't afford that." Naomi stirred her coffee, eyes steady. "Then I'll make sure they choke on it." Later that day, she went to the Eastview site. Construction had resumed, slowly, cautiously. The air smelled of dust and asphalt. Workers nodded as she passed. They respected her, not for her title, but for her story. As she walked through the half-built complex, she found an old woman sitting on a folding chair under the sun. It was Mrs. Hines, one of the former tenants from her childhood building. "You're Naomi Brooks," the woman said softly. "I used to live down the hall from your mama. You were always drawing in the hallway." Naomi smiled sadly. "Yes, ma'am. I remember you." Mrs. Hines took her hand. "Your mama'd be proud. But be careful, child. The same people who burned down our home still hold the matches." Naomi's chest tightened. The warning felt heavier than fear. It felt like prophecy. As she left the site, her phone buzzed again. A new message. "You took down one king, but the castle still stands. When truth threatens the rich, they call it rebellion. When it threatens the poor, they call it justice." By the next week, the city was divided. Half hailed Naomi as a hero, a voice for the voiceless. The other half painted her as reckless, accusing her of destroying jobs and hurting the local economy. Headlines twisted her words. Politicians called for investigations. Even her firm received threats to cut ties with her or lose investors. She sat in her office late one night, scrolling through hate mail. Traitor. Ungrateful. You people always destroy what's built for you. The words burned, but only fueled her fire. Across town, Charles Whitford sat in his quiet study, watching the chaos unfold on TV. He hadn't spoken to Naomi since Hargrove's arrest, but he'd been following everything. And for the first time, he understood what it meant to have his privilege used against someone brave enough to challenge power. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. "Naomi, it's Charles." She hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Whitford, surprised to hear from you. I read about the break-in, you okay?" She paused. "You didn't call to ask that?" He sighed. "No, I called because I can help." Naomi laughed bitterly. "You've helped enough, remember? 20 years ago?" "That's exactly why I want to do this now," he said. "I owe you, and your mother, more than an apology." She stayed silent, torn between distrust and exhaustion. "What do you have in mind?" "I still have friends in city council," he said. "Ones who don't like Hargrove's old allies. They're scared right now. You could use that." Naomi frowned. "You're saying I should play politics?" "I'm saying," Charles replied, "you're fighting people who built politics. You can't win by staying outside the room." His words lingered long after the call ended. Naomi had spent her whole life fighting the system. Now she was being asked to step inside it. The next morning, she walked into City Hall, head high, steps calm. Reporters shouted her name as she passed, flashes blinding her. She ignored them all. In the council chamber, she met a line of powerful men and women. Among them, Councilman Grayson, Hargrove's former partner, now acting like an innocent bystander. "Miss Brooks," he greeted with a polished smile. "Quite the media star, aren't you?" "I didn't come for attention," she said evenly. "I came for accountability." He chuckled. "Those are big words for a young lady with no seat at this table." Naomi met his gaze. "That's fine. I'll build my own table." A few council members exchanged uneasy looks. She wasn't just another activist. She was unshakable. When the meeting adjourned, Grayson approached her privately. "Miss Brooks, take my advice. Walk away while you still can. This city eats people like you." Naomi smiled faintly. "Then it's time the city learns who it's trying to swallow." As she exited the building, a black SUV rolled slowly down the curb. The tinted window lowered, just enough for her to glimpse the driver's eyes. It wasn't Hargrove. It was someone she hadn't seen since childhood. Kyle Whitford, Charles's estranged son. He leaned out slightly, voice cold. "You should have stayed quiet." The SUV sped off before she could respond. Naomi stood frozen on the steps of City Hall, her pulse racing. For years, she thought her biggest battle was over. Now she realized it was just beginning. If this part hit you, if you felt that tension between truth and fear, hit that subscribe button and join the Top Core family. We tell stories that America tries to forget, until they're forced to listen. What do you think Naomi should do next? Sometimes the enemy isn't hiding in the dark. He's standing right behind your spotlight. For 2 days, Naomi barely slept. Kyle Whitford's sudden appearance haunted her thoughts. Why now? What did he want? Her calls to Charles went unanswered. She left messages, nothing. It was as if he'd vanished overnight. The city felt colder. The noise of progress had turned into whispers of threat. At her office, the tension was visible. Her assistant, Carla, looked nervous every time the phone rang. "Miss Brooks, a man's been calling. Won't leave his name. Says you owe him." Naomi sighed. "Block the number. We don't owe anyone." But deep down, She knew what this meant. Her project, Eastview Renewal, had become a battlefield between those who wanted change and those who wanted silence. Later that evening, Naomi was reviewing blueprints when Marcus burst into the room. He was sweating, phone in hand. "Naomi, you need to see this." He played a news clip, shaky footage of men torching construction equipment at the Eastview site. The voiceover reported it as community unrest. But Naomi knew better. This wasn't protest, it was intimidation. Her chest tightened as she whispered, "They're sending a message." Marcus clenched his fists. "We should get police involved." She shook her head. "No, not yet. They'll just call it vandalism. I need proof of who's behind it." That night, Naomi drove out to the Eastview site herself. The smell of smoke hung in the air. Charred remains of wooden frames and melted plastic lined the ground. The sign that once read, "A Future for All," was half burned, the word all barely visible. She knelt down and touched the ashes. Something metallic glimmered nearby. A lighter with engraved initials. KW. Naomi's stomach turned cold. Kyle Whitford had left his mark, not just as a warning, but as a claim. Suddenly, headlights flashed across the lot. A car door slammed. Naomi turned, her pulse spiked, and saw a figure approaching. It was Charles. "Naomi," he called out. "What the hell are you doing here alone?" She stood, voice sharp. "I could ask you the same thing. Where have you been?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Trying to keep my son from ruining everything." Her eyes narrowed. "Your son?" "Yes," he said grimly. "Kyle's been working with some of Hargrove's old associates. They want to take over the project and destroy your reputation in the process." Naomi took a step back. "So this is your way of helping me? Letting your family burn my work?" Charles looked defeated. "I didn't know it would go this far." Naomi glared at him, every muscle tense. "You always say that. You didn't know 20 years ago when you threw us out. You didn't know now. But your ignorance keeps costing lives." He didn't respond, just looked down, ashamed. And in that silence, Naomi realized something. She didn't need his guilt anymore. She needed power. She turned away, voice steady. "Then stay out of my way, Mr. Whitford. I'm done waiting for rich men to feel sorry." As she walked back to her car, Charles called after her. "Naomi, they're coming for you next." She didn't turn around. When truth gets too loud, power tries to make it look like chaos. The next morning, Naomi woke to chaos, not from outside, but from within her own company. Half her staff had resigned overnight. Emails leaked, accusing her of mismanaging funds from the Eastview project. The city had launched an official audit. It was the perfect storm, and someone had planned every drop. She stormed into Marcus's office. "Who leaked those documents?" He shook his head. "We don't know, but they weren't real. Somebody forged financial statements." Naomi's jaw clenched. "They're trying to bury me before the truth spreads." Marcus hesitated. "There's more. City Council froze the project funds. Construction's halted indefinitely." Naomi stared at him, the room spinning. "They're killing everything we worked for." Before she could speak again, her phone buzzed. A private number. She answered, voice cold. "Who is this?" A smooth male voice replied. "You've been busy, Miss Brooks." Her pulse quickened. "Kyle." "Smart girl," he said. "You made my father look weak. That's not something I forgive easily." Naomi gripped the phone tighter. "You think burning my project will scare me?" He chuckled softly. "No, but destroying your credibility will." "Why?" she demanded. "Because people like you forget your place," he said. "You think building a few apartments makes you equal. It doesn't." Naomi's hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. "Then I'll remind you who really built this city," she said, and hung up. Moments later, Marcus entered with another file. "You need to see this. It's worse than we thought." He laid out photos, images of her at the Eastview site. digitally altered to make it look like she was paying men to start the fire. Naomi stared at them, disbelief turning into nausea. "They're framing me." Marcus nodded. "They're turning you into the villain." By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Naomi Brooks, hero or hustler. News channels ran with the narrative. Social media turned vicious. Sponsors pulled out. The public turned. Charles saw it all. He called Naomi, but she didn't pick up. So he went to her apartment, but by the time he arrived, flashing police lights filled the street. 2 officers stood by Naomi's door. "Is there a problem?" Charles asked. The officer turned. "You Charles Whitford?" "Yes." "She requested you as a witness," the officer said. "She's being brought in for questioning." Charles's chest tightened. "For what?" "Arson and fraud." Naomi stepped out, hands cuffed, eyes blazing but unbroken. Their eyes met, hers filled with pain, his with guilt. She spoke calmly, almost defiantly. "Guess I finally built something powerful enough to scare them." And as the police car doors closed, Charles whispered the words he never imagined saying to the girl he once evicted. "I won't let them bury you again. When they can't destroy your truth, they destroy your name." Naomi sat in the cold interrogation room, her wrists red from the handcuffs, her reflection flickering in the one-way mirror. The detective across from her flipped through a folder like he already had the ending written. "Miss Brooks," he began, "your company received $3 million in community funds. That money's missing. The same week, your construction site went up in flames." Naomi's voice was calm, but her eyes blazed. "You think I'd burn down the very thing I built?" The detective leaned forward. "The pictures say otherwise. Witnesses claim you paid men to do it." Naomi let out a breath and stared straight into the glass. "Then find the men." He didn't reply. He didn't have to. This wasn't about finding truth. It was about breaking her spirit. Hours later, Naomi was released on bail, thanks to Charles, who had spent the entire night pulling strings to make it happen. As she walked out of the precinct, the crowd outside turned feral. Reporters screamed questions, phones flashed in her face. "Naomi, did you steal from your own people? Did you fake the fire for insurance money? Are you using racism to cover corruption?" Each word was like a dagger. Marcus tried shielding her, shouting, "Back off." But the mob only grew louder. When they finally got into the car, Naomi sat silent for miles. Charles drove, his jaw tight with guilt. "I talked to the mayor. He says the council's voting to terminate your contract." Naomi turned toward him slowly. "And you? You voting with them too?" Charles gripped the wheel. "Naomi, I'm trying." She cut him off, her voice trembling but fierce. "No, Charles. You're doing what rich men always do, trying to fix the mess they created without admitting it's theirs." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because deep down, she was right. When they reached her office, Marcus handed her a laptop. "You need to see this." On the screen was a new viral post. "Naomi Brooks exposed, the woman who betrayed her own community." Thousands of comments scrolled beneath. Half of them racist, half pretending to be disappointed supporters. Naomi stared blankly. Then quietly she said, "They're not just killing my name. They're rewriting history." Marcus sighed. "Then we rewrite it back." She looked up. "What do you mean?" "I found something," he said, pulling out a flash drive. "The building permits, the one signed by city officials. The signature approving the fund transfer wasn't yours." Naomi's heart skipped. "Then whose?" He plugged in the drive. The screen filled with a scanned document, signature clear at the bottom. Kyle Whitford. Naomi froze. "He used his father's credentials." Marcus nodded. "He moved the money and pinned it on you." Naomi leaned back, a small, cold smile curling at the corner of her lips. Then it's time they see what justice really looks like. But before she could say another word, A gunshot shattered her office window. Marcus tackled her to the floor. Glass rained down. Screams echoed. The bullet had missed her head by inches, and as she lay there, shaking but alive, Naomi whispered, "They're not just after my name anymore. They want me gone." Truth doesn't stand a chance when money holds the gavel. The courthouse buzzed with tension. Outside, protesters held signs, some calling Naomi a fraud, others demanding justice. Inside, Naomi sat beside her lawyer, eyes heavy but unbroken. Across the aisle sat Kyle Whitford, calm, smug, expensive. Charles was behind him, face pale, the weight of fatherhood and guilt sitting heavy on his shoulders. The judge entered. "Court is now in session." The prosecutor wasted no time. "Your Honor, Miss Brooks used community funds to benefit herself, then destroyed evidence of her crimes through arson. We have witnesses, documents, and financial proof." Naomi's lawyer rose. "Objection, Your Honor. Those documents were tampered with." "Sustained," the judge cut in. Naomi could see it already. The deck was stacked. As the hearing continued, the courtroom turned into theater. Kyle smirked every time her name was mentioned. Every lie landed like another stone in her coffin. When it was finally Naomi's turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice was low, steady, filled with quiet fire. "I was born in that same neighborhood they burned," she began. "My father laid the first bricks of this city while theirs watched from glass towers. Now they call me a criminal for trying to rebuild what they destroyed." The crowd murmured. The judge frowned, but Naomi continued. "They call it corruption. I call it history repeating itself, because every time someone like me rises, someone like them panics." Her eyes locked with Kyle's. "You forged my name. You stole my dream. But you forgot one thing. Truth leaves footprints." The room went silent. Charles shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Naomi, then at his son. The shame was unbearable. Her lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have new evidence showing the fund transfers came from the Whitford family's internal accounts." The judge looked startled. "Present it." Marcus walked in from the gallery holding a folder. He handed it to the clerk. Proof, sealed and undeniable. But before it could be reviewed, Kyle whispered something to his attorney, who stood and demanded, "Motion to recess, Your Honor." The judge agreed. As the courtroom cleared, Charles approached Naomi quietly. "You were right," he said, "about everything. I thought I could fix this quietly, but my silence became complicity." Naomi's voice was firm but not cruel. "You can't fix this for me, Charles. You can only tell the truth." He nodded slowly. "Then I will." That night the news broke again. City mogul Charles Whitford to testify against his own son. The city froze. The family name that once ruled every corner of Springfield was about to collapse under its own shadow. Naomi watched the report alone from her small apartment window. She whispered, "This isn't victory, it's survival." But in that whisper, for the first time, there was hope. If that moment hit you, if Naomi's fight reminded you how truth always costs something, hit subscribe, drop a comment with, and share this story. On Top Core, we turn pain into purpose, because every burned bridge can light the way home. Sometimes the hardest truth to face is the one that wears your last name. The courthouse was standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall. The air carried that heavy silence people get before a storm. Charles Whitford walked to the witness stand in a dark gray suit that looked like it hadn't been slept in. Because it hadn't. Every step sounded like guilt hitting the floor. Kyle, seated at the defense table, didn't even glance at him. He sat tall, lips curled into a smirk that said, "I own this room." But today, he didn't. Charles raised his hand for the oath, voice trembling. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth." When he sat down, Naomi lifted her eyes toward him. Not with anger, but something colder. Expectation. The prosecutor leaned forward. Mr. Whitford, you're the chairman of Whitford Developments, correct? Charles nodded. And this company received federal grants for urban renewal. Funds later tied to Miss Naomi Brooks's alleged embezzlement. Another nod. The crowd buzzed. Cameras clicked. The prosecutor continued. Did you or anyone in your family authorize those transfers? Charles's throat moved, but no sound came out. He looked at Kyle, his only son, his blood, and whispered, Yes. The room gasped. Kyle's face snapped toward him. Dad, what the hell are you doing? The judge slammed her gavel. Order. Charles steadied himself. My son used my digital signature. I tried to bury it. I told myself it would protect the family. But I see now, protecting him meant destroying someone innocent. Naomi didn't blink. She'd dreamed of this moment, not to watch a man fall, but to finally be seen. Kyle rose from his seat, fury flashing in his eyes. You think they'll forgive you for this, old man? You think this town will still call you sir? Charles's eyes filled. I don't care what they call me anymore. I just want my soul back. The prosecutor nodded solemnly. Your Honor, we move to submit this as new evidence exonerating Miss Brooks. Cheers erupted. Naomi closed her eyes, hands shaking, tears falling silently. But just as the judge prepared to speak, Kyle snapped. He lunged across the table, shoving papers to the floor. You'll all regret this. She's not a saint. She played you all. Officers tackled him before he could reach her. As they dragged him out, his voice echoed through the room. This isn't over. Naomi opened her eyes. For the first time in months, she saw daylight breaking through the storm. Outside, the press went wild. Headlines blazed. Billionaire turns on his own blood to save wrongly accused woman. That night, Naomi walked alone to the burned shell of her first community center, the place where it all began. She knelt in the ashes, whispering, Daddy, they finally heard me. But behind her, footsteps crunched the gravel. A shadow stepped closer. Funny, a voice said. You think the Whitfords were the only ones who wanted you gone? Naomi froze. When she turned, a man she'd once trusted stood there, one of the local councilmen who had promised her funding months ago. You're about to find out, he said, that truth doesn't scare the rich. It scares the powerful. He dropped a folder at her feet. Inside were photos of more signatures, more names. Naomi's voice cracked. So this wasn't just them. He smiled. Welcome to the real war. Justice doesn't end when the gavel drops. That's just when the fight starts to cost you. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She spread the photos across her table. City officials, developers, even a senator, all tied to illegal land seizures masked as revitalization projects. Marcus paced behind her. They burned your house to cover a citywide scam. Naomi nodded slowly. And I was the perfect distraction. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Public protests filled the square. Some shouted for Naomi's justice. Others screamed for her to go back where she came from. Charles called her from his hospital bed, exhausted, recovering after collapsing post-testimony. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't deserve forgiveness, but if you ever rebuild again, I'll fund it. Every brick. Naomi's voice was quiet. No. You'll help others rebuild, not for me, but for every family you displaced. Charles cried softly. You sound like your father. Her eyes glistened. He built this town. You just finally remembered it. As the city council scrambled to contain the scandal, Naomi was summoned to a private meeting. When she entered the mayor's office, the air smelled of fear and fresh coffee. The mayor, nervous, sweating, offered her a deal. Drop your case. In exchange, we'll restore your contract and pay damages. Quietly. Naomi looked around the room, every wall covered with portraits of powerful white men who'd shaped the city's history. She said calmly, You think I fought all this time just to rebuild buildings? I'm rebuilding truth. The mayor leaned forward. You'll be finished in this town. Naomi stood, gathered the files, and said, Then I'll build a new one. That night, her speech aired live. Her words poured through every home like fire and rain mixed together. I was 8 years old when a man told my father we didn't belong here. 30 years later, I hear the same words, just spoken with better suits and quieter hate. But here's the thing. You can burn our homes, but not our hands. We built this place. And we'll build it again. The crowd erupted. From the courthouse steps to the poorest street corners, people cheered. Even Charles watched from his hospital room, whispering, She did it. But just when the applause reached its peak, Naomi's phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. You should have taken the deal. Before she could react, the night sky behind her burst into light. The construction site for her new housing project was on fire again. Sirens wailed. People screamed. Naomi stood frozen, staring at the flames consuming everything she'd just rebuilt. And through the smoke, she saw something chilling. A single man walking away, head down, jacket bearing the same city council emblem. Her voice cracked as she whispered, It was never about justice. It was about control. Some people build cities with concrete, others rebuild them with courage. Smoke covered the skyline like a bruise. Naomi stood in the crowd as firefighters wrestled with the blaze. Her new housing project, the Brooks Community Center, was reduced to ashes again. But this time, she didn't cry. She just stared at the city lights reflected in the flames, her voice steady. They're trying to burn my name off the map. Marcus pulled up beside her, breathless. They're saying it was electrical. You believe that? Naomi shook her head. That's what they said about my daddy's shop back in '99. Same story, same people. A fire captain approached quietly. Ma'am, there's something you should see. He led her to what was left of her office. Amid the soot and twisted metal, one wall somehow stood untouched. The mural she'd painted with local kids reading We Belong Here. And beneath it, spray-painted in red, were the words, Not in our city. Naomi clenched her jaw. They think fear's enough to stop me, Marcus said softly, then make them afraid of truth. By morning, the news exploded. Community center burns down. Hate crime suspected. Charles watched from his hospital bed, shaking with anger. He called Naomi immediately. We'll rebuild again, I'll triple the funds. But Naomi's voice was different now. Colder, sharper, tired of rebuilding ashes. I don't need more money, Charles. I need names. And she had one. The photo she'd seen, the man with the city council jacket, was Councilman Reeves, one of Atlanta's most powerful developers and a lifelong ally of Charles's late father. That afternoon, Naomi walked into City Hall with cameras following. She didn't wait for permission. She burst into Reeves's office and dropped the photo on his desk. Why'd you burn it? She demanded. Why are you still fighting the same war your father lost? Reeves leaned back, grinning. Because power doesn't die, Miss Brooks. It just changes its face. Naomi slammed her hand on the desk. You ruined lives, families. You stole homes that didn't belong to you. He rose slowly. And you think this city runs on your dreams? It runs on deals. Every brick you lay costs someone their control. And that scares the men who built this place. Naomi leaned closer. Then maybe it's time they lost it. Later that night, Marcus found her sitting on the courthouse steps, the same place her mother once begged for mercy years ago. He sat beside her quietly until she spoke. You ever wonder why they keep burning what we build? Marcus nodded. Because they don't fear the fire, they fear what rises after. Naomi smiled faintly. Then I'll give them something to fear. She pulled out her father's old keychain, the only thing left from their eviction day, and whispered, This is where we end it, Daddy. That night, Naomi went live on every platform she had. Behind her, the burned frame of the community center glowed faintly in the moonlight. 20 years ago, this city threw my family into the cold for profit. 20 hours ago, they burned down what we built to rise again. But I'm not here to beg for sympathy. I'm here to expose every hand that's been lighting matches behind closed doors. She held up documents. Real names, real deals, dates, signatures. Reeves, 3 other councilmen, a fake redevelopment trust, and one signature that broke everyone watching, Charles Whitford's late father, whose old company still owned the land. Naomi said, "They call it progress, I call it theft. But tonight I'm calling it finished." The stream hit 1 million views in 2 hours. Protests erupted across Atlanta. Someone spray-painted "Rebuild with Naomi" on City Hall's steps. But somewhere across town, Reeves watched the same stream and whispered to someone on the phone, "She just declared war." When truth finally speaks, even the buildings listen. The morning after Naomi's live stream, Atlanta looked different. Helicopters circled, reporters swarmed, FBI vans rolled into the city council's parking lot. Reeves and 2 other officials were escorted out in handcuffs. Charles arrived in a wheelchair, pale but determined. He rolled into the crowd where Naomi stood, facing the press. Everyone fell silent as the 2 locked eyes, the man who once took her home and the woman who rebuilt it. Charles took the mic. "My father's empire was built on taking. Hers was built on giving. Today I'm giving everything back, every deed, every dollar, every acre that was stolen." Naomi stepped forward, speechless. Charles handed her a folder. Inside were legal papers transferring his entire company's land holdings to the Brooks Foundation. He said softly, "You once told me to build, not to buy. I finally understand what you meant." Tears filled her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." He smiled weakly. "I did, because for the first time in my life, I want my name to stand for something worth remembering." The crowd erupted, but as the cheers rose, Naomi turned and froze. Marcus was rushing toward her, waving his phone. "Naomi, Reeves escaped custody." Before she could respond, gunshots echoed through the square. Screams filled the air. Charles grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a concrete pillar. Security tackled Reeves seconds later, but the damage was done. Chaos, panic, fear. Charles clutched his chest, gasping. "Go," he whispered. "Finish what you started." Naomi held him, tears streaming. "You're not dying on me, not now." He smiled faintly. "I'm not dying. I'm finally living right." Paramedics rushed in. As they wheeled Charles away, Naomi turned toward the crowd. Thousands of people watching, crying, holding hands across color lines. She stepped up to the mic, voice cracking but fierce. "You can shoot a man, you can burn a house, but you can't kill truth. Because truth is the foundation we build on." The crowd roared. News stations across America replayed those words for days. Months later, Eastview was reborn. Brick by brick, Naomi rebuilt the center again, stronger, taller, wider. This time the sign out front read, "Brooks Whitford Center for Equal Housing." Inside the lobby, 2 photos hung side by side. One of Elaine Brooks holding Naomi as a child, and the other of Charles, smiling quietly at the ribbon cutting. Under them, a plaque read, "For every family who lost their home, and for those who fought to rebuild one." As Naomi walked through the hall, kids ran past her, laughing, playing, free. She smiled, whispering, "This time, they can't take it." Then she looked outside. Across the street, the skyline reflected the new building's glass, the old city staring back at the new one, both connected forever. Naomi smiled softly. Justice doesn't rebuild what was lost. It builds what should have been. Thanks for watching. If this story hit you deep, if you believe in justice that rebuilds instead of destroys, hit subscribe, share this story, and drop a in the comments. Because on Top Core, we don't just tell stories, we rebuild what hate tried to burn.